Thank you so much for that input. I'm going to quote you. You once wrote that the commemoration of Biko's life must happen within the globalized philosophical discourse of Black radical resistance. So I lay this foreground primarily because of the next theme that you said you were going to touch on.
Yes.
And that's the biggest band, the best band, the freshest band in the world. And how they relate to us as healers,
Yes.
as time tellers,
Yes.
and as people who make us dance and
Yes.
and experience joy. So with that foreground, I guess my next question, and I think this is where I would like members of the community to also start to think about contributing when we open up the floor, is the use of alcohol and the adolescent. And we're speaking about young people who are developing more agency as they get older. So we're speaking just before primary into high school, where you are beginning to develop more and more of your powers and agency and things to say yes to and things to say no to. My question with the foreground laid is how programmatically or through words or through some sort of structure does the idea of a different calibration towards alcohol, how do we make that appeal to young people and to people who look at us in circumstances that haven't changed too much from when we were younger and say, no, don't do what we did, So that's my question in light of what the band means as a collective and you wanting to expand on the definition. Yeah.
So let me just quote what let me copy you. We are quoting somebody. Let me also quote here.
Quote for quote.
Yes. I wish to respectfully suggest it is a misnomer to refer to iPhupho L'ka Biko as a music or jazz band. iPhupho L'ka Biko is a movement, an awakening, a consciousness. But above all, iPhupho L'ka Biko is an intervention. An intervention for who and for what purpose? iPhupho L'ka Biko is a Black radical intervention on behalf of Black people against the historically evolved system of white supremacy, whose basic logic is, in the world that we live in, to be white is to be human, and to be human is to be white. That is where I locate the movement, the intervention referred to as iPhupho L'ka Biko. That they are a Black radical intervention. If I were to be metaphysical, they are zizithunywa zamanyange. They have been sent to us. They may or may not be aware of it. They have been sent to us. And music and the art form referred to as jazz is simply a medium through which they are expected to pass on imiyalelo yabantu abadala. So, one of the platforms that we have created to deal with the type of challenge you have alluded, I've said in one paper that if you look at post-Biko Black consciousness, what are the manifestations of post-Biko Black consciousness? And one of the manifestations I mentioned in that paper is iPhupho L'ka Biko, right? As one of the post-Biko Black consciousness. But it is not a disjuncture, it is a continuation. And I'm just using the post-Biko formulation for convenience because everything is connected and it is a continuation. And we must also not reduce the problem for convenience of alcohol to a youth thing, right? The problem of alcohol is an issue of captivity. It is used as an instrument of captivity to keep Black people as captives in the name of entertainment, in the name of recreation, in the name of happiness, right? So people who study anatomy, physiology, and psychology, essentially how the human body and the human mind works, right, are trained to understand which impulses to press in order to control a human being. And like you correctly said, the condition we find ourselves in did not happen through osmosis, right? This was engineered to be this way. You can, for instance, see how if you remember, historically during the early 20th century, when the Europeans came, we had a relationship with alcohol, right? Alcohol, which was not produced through, say, their form of industrial means. We had indigenous forms of alcohol, which came from some of the trees and mill and all sorts of things. So there was some form of alcohol. It was not something that was introduced to us. But how it was taken over and how it was used as an instrument of control, because they even had laws, not just in South Africa, which were passed, that for you to buy white man's alcohol, I want to call it like that, you had to get a special permit. Now, many of you who come from families where you have surnames that are suspicious, right? Where you suspect you are Tim Kulu, but you actually have Grootboom, has to do with the fact that some of our grandfathers changed their surnames simply to go and get access to what is called a tiki bar, to get a nip or a tot. Many of us don't know those, but it is true. And those surnames got carried on, right? And so it is important for us to understand how deep this thing is. And there's another just thing to understand. Have you noticed in the concentration camp, which we call townships, that every second street has got a shebeen or a tavern, right? But you won't find a school, a preschool, or a football pitch in every second street. This is 30 years later. Every second street has got a shebeen in it. Now, do you then understand what our young people are up against, just visually? You know, so we must also be careful as to locate the problem at a behavioral level. We must understand the structural violence, right, that Black people as a group are up against, even in areas that they call our own. That when you turn, there's a shebeen here. When you look, there's a shebeen here. There's a shebeen here. Brawatwat, brawatwat, brawatwat. You know, many of the taverns are called brawatwat. I don't know if you've noticed, you know. Maybe we'll have siswatwat some other day. Not that I wish it should happen. But the point that one is making is that where we locate the problem, right, will also determine what we define as the solution. And for me, the problem is not so much whether young people are attracted to alcohol or whether alcohol is attractive to them. The main problem is the nature of our existence and how it is designed to produce almost suicidal types of behavior, which we call entertainment, you know, or ukchila. Later, I will talk about a concept called conquering. That has nothing to do with the place Konka. Because Konka itself got that name during the era of Kwaito Kemina Nentangazam. There was this concept of conquering, you know, and Ikonka as an institution just took that name and usurped it. But I'll speak to the concept and the lifestyle conquering.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we're about to enter your final theme, which you are looking to touch upon. And before that, I think I'd like to add another question, a final one. I'd like you to touch a bit more, and you've started, on aspects of shame, of guilt, and of spiral. The idea of trying to make sense that respite, right, so not necessarily the answer to our problems, but some sort of a break does exist sometimes at the bottom of a bottle after a really difficult day. How do we begin to confront the idea that rest sometimes exists in a glass bottle, but the longer term vision requires us not necessarily to lean on those things? As an opening remark, as you move into your final aspect, which is, you know, the Black community and Black life as it relates to consumption.
Black world and alcohol, yeah. So it is also important for us to understand something that is called programming, right? So this thing of robotics now and 4IR and what, this thing, the concept of programming people and things has been there for as long as human beings have been there, right? Now, the thing that you speak about, my brother, about when you, the whole concept of thinking that after a hard day, right, I must go and get a bottle of this and that. That whole thing, that whole logic, that whole behavior pattern is structured. And it follows the logic of slavery. If you look at how the day of a slave is designed in terms of the logic of slavery. So the fact that you use a credit card and you drink Heineken or you drink Hennessy can fool you into thinking you are not involved in a project of slavery. Because it has been made very sexy and sophisticated, and it's bubbly, and it is shampopo and da-da-da. Now, that is the art of deception when we are fed images that distort our sense of reality because the visual is powerful, So have you seen, if you are on social media, there are people who can portray a life of billionaires when they're not billionaires. That's the power of images. And there are people who could actually find themselves relating with those people as billionaires. That's the power, how captivating images are. Now, the thing you are describing has to do with how slavery, our existence is structured, right? And I want to just draw your mind to, there's actually a number of adverts, alcohol adverts, that depict the very same thing you are saying. You remember that milk stout ad, that ngaba, if you see the logic there, how the logic follows, about what it means to be a strong black man, but at the end of all of that, you must go and, sort of like thank your body. Thank it by feeding it toxins, Go and thank your body. You go there, and then so, then there's a guy that says, something to the extent, they even use our languages to capture us. Then there's a similar ad also, Ye Lion Lag, which does the same thing. I see Utatwe to nods in agreement, so because pictures again, I'm sure you're getting the picture. There's a similar one. All of those things are part and parcel of programming and mind control of the system because we call it advertising, but it is part and parcel of the instruments that the system uses to keep us, right, at the bottom of the human pyramid so that we exist for exactly what you have said. The only thing you are working for, is six-pack. That's what they want us to do. So the ones who have got certificates that are called degrees, right, are going to buy something that they think is classier. And then the ones are going to buy in good, it's the same concept. It's just slaves of a different manifest. All of them are slaves, and the slave master knows, And to make it worse, I usually laugh painfully. I usually laugh at my brothers who usually diss each other about this one drinking. There's even social class when you drink. I usually hear how my brothers weaponize this thing. The other one is drinking something of a lower class. And because they are drinking something, they think that automatically puts them in a higher class. That's how powerful that thing is, And the person says, I don't drink this thing. What is this thing? And then they even fight at times. And what, But all that one is saying is that is the extent to which we have become synonymous and have had our identity interwoven with the instruments of control that Europeans have created. So there are probably people in here, and take your ego out of it, deal with the discussion, who probably define themselves by, I'm a wine drinker. And you have specific brands of wine. And it has to also do with your esteem. So subliminally, you're also saying you can't be seen drinking any other thing other than wine.
So for young Blanc.
Do you understand? And others even fight with you if your tongue is not able to be as dynamic as that, Blanc, that thing. But all that one is trying to show, as we laugh at ourselves, and I like that, is the extent to which we are captured. Because we end up even fighting over these things, and they're part of our identity, you know. And that is the types of things I believe we must be able to distill and unravel, you know, in the manner that we are doing here, you know, without coming across as self-righteous or as if we know everything. We don't. There's no such a thing. But as part of trying to find each other in each other and trying to carve a path for ourselves, you know. Yep.
No, thank you for that. Comrades, we're now going to move into the aspect of collective wisdom. Nobody has a monopoly over what or how we should go about excavating ourselves. So with the last couple of minutes of this session, we're going to take a couple of hands just for some contributions, for some comments, before we move on to the last segment, which is, you know, the band coming back and playing their second set. So do we have any questions, any comments, any stand-up jokes, anything? Yeah, sure, I'll take 3 hands for now, and then we'll see whether we have time. So Sisi in the beautiful top here is one. Is there anybody? I can't see at the back, so you'll have to shout.
Molweni. I really appreciate the empathy around some of these topics that you've had in your tone a lot. I think you mentioned, you know, experience, personal experience. It's something that always saddened me to see Elokshini, where my grandparents have a home, to see Lendutatangayo of Shabines in every other street. It was even sadder to find out how the South African Liquor Board is so happy to provide licenses to every other street so that this systematic oppression is legitimized and legal. And I remember living in Cape Town, Dihlala, in an area called Pinelands, and Pinelands is a dry neighborhood. You cannot find liquor in Pinelands at all. And as a fact, if you try to get a liquor license, the community will just, it's a no. You'll have to look outside of that neighborhood to find something. And it really pained me to, okay, ababantu bayazilungiselela nyani. Really, they're setting themselves up, and it made me see the pain that abantu are dealing with back elokshini, because again, representation is so important. What you are seeing constantly, what you are being exposed to constantly, is going to become part and parcel of ubomi bakho. And so I really just want to share that and add that, because it's something that really touched me. Why in our communities? Why is it so easy? Why you can't call the police, you can't ask for assistance or any kind of support because of the legalization and the systemization of ukuba we need to be broken down in all of these ways, physically, psychologically, socially.
Thank you so much for that. Do you want to respond now, or do you want to take the other questions as well? Any other questions? Are you a thorough today? Okay, we have 2 this side.
Fire. Maybe it's not a question, but I'm just gonna speak about something that concerns me, in the way I live my personal life. So, in the way is very tricky, man. Master Amanzi, especially as black people. So, because I concern myself about trying to live, né? So, and I understand that as a black person, I'm coming from a point where I'm just defeated. Make peace with that shit. I'm defeated. Until whoever is in charge, one way or another. Now, as somebody who's defeated, for some reason, I'm trying to feel alive, whether it's through the bottle, whether it's through violence. Yeah. It's really the effect. Whether it's through the bottle, through violence, or through somehow just being wretched, man. Can tell. It makes sense. That's how I have to go through life, because that's how I feel somehow, because I understand one simple fact. Debate. Outside of that, maybe if I'm gonna call myself a radical or whatever I call myself, so what I do at all times must always stem from that thing. I'm being wretched, I'm being defiant or a radical, somehow. And then beer, drinking a bottle, finding myself in that part, becomes something that I use in this type of like irresponsible because I know I can't answer the situation in Goya, and normally I can make it. Even if I study degrees and whatever, I will not make it. And then besides that, so what I'm trying to figure out, man, on the kupa kanjani kule situation, especially as someone who is aware about, okay, sharp, ndiyazama. Ndiyazama. Daily, I'm adding 4, 5, 6. I put this, I put that, I put that. I meet the people, whatever is considered like a strategy, whatever. Go to I pass is set up. I think, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Let's take.
Sure. I think I'll just continue from where Ubudi ended. I'm also searching for alternatives. What alternatives do we have as Black people? I'm more interested in what you will define as emancipatory, sort of alternatives for Black people. I'm also more interested in what do you make of some of the historical moments where the state, the colonial state and the apartheid racist state created these beer halls. And then there were moments of emancipatory moments where intellectuals and all sorts of people meet in these spaces. Women also use these spaces to sort of fight against colonial conquest. I'm interested in what you make of this contradiction of alcohol, where these are spaces, social spaces, where we meet as a band. And in those spaces, there are sort of alternatives. Ideas are met, an idea of a movement, of a party to challenge the system is sort of implanted in that space of consuming alcohol.
Okay. All right. Let me start with Utatwetu, and incidentally, I know Pinelands very well. So I stayed in Cape Town, so it's through Lendwitetai. Now, in addition to Lendwitetai or Utatwetu, this thing continues. So we talk coloniality, slavery. It is a continuing discourse and system. It has not stopped, right? And sometimes I think it's important to remind us, slavery, coloniality, all those systems that meant to reduce us to nothingness have not stopped functioning. They just have different names now, but that project continues. For instance, it doesn't matter how small a town is in our country, right? It may lack all sorts of facilities, but there is this one thing it will always have, a bottle store. But as you also noticed, they always make sure there's a police station as well and a magistrate's place, because they know that at some stage that bottle store is going to present problems for the police station and that thing. Where does that concept come from? It comes from slavery. If you go and look at how the slave plantations were designed and where the places where slaves were going to and their proximity, the very physical layout of space is political. It's dangerous to say we have a person is a black engineer, right? Whatever type of engineer, but they don't understand that even the work that they do as engineers is political. That's why we must have spaces like this where we get lawyers to also understand that your jurisprudence is political. You know, that you don't have to be in a political party to make political decisions and to impact things politically. Help people understand that the essence of politics is essentially about two things: how society is organized and how power is distributed. That's what determines what is called politics, not what colors you wear and who you vote for. You know, how society is organized and how power within society is distributed. That's what determines what we should call politics. And you then get unsophisticated politics that reduce politics to voting and colors and belonging. Very unsophisticated agricultural politics. Sadly, people kill for those politics, right? And we must find ways of lifting our understanding of politics to a higher level. Then there is the thing that Mfowethu is raising, and that is what made my spirit heavy, this thing with Tetai, because I've seen how there's something that Biko says about it. There's an extract where he talks about the type of black man we have today, right? And he describes this black man as an ox, a defeated man who's like an ox bearing the yoke of oppression, and that when he is angry, he takes out his anger on the property of his fellow black men, where he essentially uses the notion of the black man as a defeated man. I thought of that metaphor as you were talking. Remember also, Puti, that is exactly the intention of the system, that the system wants us to send those messages to ourselves that we are a defeated people, so that we must not even think of resistance. That is the whole agenda of white terror, deceit, and this thing, and white supremacy, that we must internalize that messaging, that our condition is what it is, and there's, you know, we have no agency, we can't change it, you know. And Uba Umangaliso Sobukwe, when he was in his 20s, Fort Hare, as the departing SRC president, said something which resonates profoundly with me, where he spoke about we must fight for the right to call our souls our own. It's okay, we can be broke, I may not have a car, but if there's one thing as a black woman, as a black man, I must never surrender to anybody, it's my soul. Because without that, I am nothing. And I am trying to make this point to say to you that we must find ways, myself and you and others, you have been more open and more honest, to continue fighting for the right to call our souls our own as we move from day to day, right? But we must never find ourselves in a situation where we give in. We shouldn't. But it is spaces like this from whence we draw the energy not to give in. Because when you sit alone in your space as an individual, you may just come to the conclusion that all is lost. And this is why becoming part of movements is important as a black person. It is compulsory for every black person, for your sanity, for your continued existence. Form part of a movement where you have a space for collective thinking, collective reflection. The thing that we are up against will drive you to suicide. That's a system that we are, because that's its intention. Then there is what Uputu was saying. And I wanted to ask if anybody knows, I was going to ask actually that question. Anybody knows umama who's unomzansi Nyembe? Does anybody know that name? Is there anybody who knows that name? Now, what Uputi spoke about, in the 1920s, one of the women who mobilized women across the country, over 60,000 women, is a mother of ours at Tegwin called Umamu Nomzansi Nyembe, who was engaging in protest against the colonial government that wanted to stop black women who were selling backroom, what do they call it? Backroom alcohol. Yeah, they have a name for it. I know a friend who's got the language tools. Right? They organized because it was their livelihood. But that's the fundamental thing that they did. Even before Abutsietsi Mashinini did it, they went into the beer halls and whipped Obaba Betu, who were sitting and drinking. Oh, mama, yeah. Yes. You know, they whipped them. And not just that, they destroyed the apartheid beer halls because they were owned by the apartheid municipalities. Umama Unomzansi Nyembe was one of the women who led that. There was a similar one in East London, in the East London area in the 1920s, coming to the 1960s. During the June 16 uprising in Soweto, Otsietsi Mashinini, Khotso Seattle and others ended up, as the students were being shot and killed, going to the shebins in the taverns in Soweto and did exactly the same thing. The majority of the people who were there, Obaba Betu, who were sitting. Yes, you know. Now, where I'm going with this is that the system made alcohol something that was the preserve of Amadot. But over time, they now came with these pink bottles, you know. And they made it even more seductive, dangerously seductive for black women. When you look at an ad, alcohol that targets black women, it does not just come with the alcohol, it comes with a car. Have you seen about Ford Fiesta, these cars that come, they go an extra mile. But have you noticed also, if you go to what is called convenience stores, about clicks and what, have you seen they've changed the layout of the store? They now put confectionery stuff, sweets and what at the entrance. Do you know what consumer psychology says? Two of the groups in terms of the LSMs who are more likely to engage in what is called irrational retailing are women and children. That's what psychology says, consumer psychology. So a lot of times, even if you decide out, you're not going to spend. But if you're with your daughter, your wife, your girlfriend, or your female friend, even if you don't want to spend, the way the store is laid out, the way the whole setup is laid out, they target them and they then pressurize you into buying. Now, have you noticed and we must be careful, gents. This thing is I don't know who told us every time we come into a social space, we must offer abosisibetu drinks. We must really rethink that habit. It is dangerous, that thing, because there are so many assumptions and expectations that come with this thing that are built into that whole habit. You know, we must really think about lazy Ndobafet. Let me leave it at that.
Yeah, no. You see now you are inspired. But unfortunately, comrades, so no, colleagues, remember we must also hold discipline to time if we respect each other. So to conclude this particular section of our program, I mean, there is going to be a session, another one, you can come, it's free. And we will expand on the conversation because we can be here until, you know, the cows come home and go again tomorrow. So masibambeni apho maqabane and invite the band to come back and give us the second half of their set before we go home, because a big part of this is allowing people to go home while it's still relatively safe outside. So let us not take, you know, more than we already have. But Veli, thank you very much. It was one hell of an engagement. Lastly, a big request from my side. Can we talk the band up on social media? Can we get the chat up? You know, they're about to release a fire album in coming course. And they say bands are judged by their listeners. So if it's people as beautiful as you, I wish you were sitting here to see what I'm seeing. I think we'll make the necessary traction. So thank you for having us, and thank you for coming. Cheers.